You're listening to the Teach Better Talk podcast featuring expert educators eager to share progressive tactics to reach more students. Teach Better Talk is created by teachers and fueled by passion. Let's get started.
Hey everyone, welcome to episode 103 of Teach Better Talk. I'm Ray Hewart, and as always, I'm with my synergetic friend, Jeff Gargis. How are you doing, Jeff?
Synergetic, huh?
Well, I'm trying to come up with these fancy words, and we are flooded with all these people sending nice words. It's just, you're not really that kind, and all these people keep thinking you're kind.
I think synergetic's a nice word.
It is a nice word. It was a good vocabulary term. Do you want to define it for our group?
It's like the synergy of it's a collaborative, it's collaboration, I guess, or willing to. It's the way in work synergy is working together, right? I guess collaboration is the best way that I can do that. Like there's this.
Yeah. So if any 10-year-olds are listening and they didn't know that word, you just defined it. I'm so proud of you.
Yeah. I like to think I'm synergetic, where I love working with people. I always love to find ways that I can work with someone else to do something and to be a part of something.
I think that's true, and I think that working with others well actually blends in perfectly with what this podcast episode was about with Sheldon, because it was really about having a space where people truly get to know each other and blend kind of ideas and cultures.
Yeah,
really
so
listen to his ideas.
So two things on that. That's absolutely right. One is I want to work with Sheldon. He's amazing. Like this was such a good episode. But he touches on something that I think is, and he talks about, I think it's being talked about more, but it's still not being talked about enough, and there's not enough being done about it. But we talk a lot about he's talking a lot about equity and understanding the culture and really immersing yourself in the different cultures that are in your classroom, in your community, and in your world, and things that with the students that you're working with, or the colleagues that you're working with, the people that you know, and get to know that and stuff. So you and I were talking about sort of a good sort of starting point, or an actual practical way in which you can do this and explore this topic in your classroom. And I know you do something in your 6th grade math class, which I know some people might be thinking, well, wait a minute, how do you do that in a 6th grade math class? But I love the way you do it. So can you walk us through the way in which you kind of attack that issue or that topic in your class?
Absolutely. I mean, Sheldon talks a lot about us needing to not just talk about things, but actually implement them, actually do them, put them into action. And so I think it's perfect for us to share some tactical next steps. You could literally listen to this episode and turn around and tomorrow go do in your classroom. Some easy ones is, if you want to get to know your students and get to know their cultures, provide them opportunities to express themselves, even if it's just something as easy as a student survey. I know that a lot of teachers do writing prompts. That could be really great ways to learn about your students. And there's a lot of different ways using technology that you go back and forth with the conversation being a little more private between your students and yourself. My goofy way is, for those of you that know my classroom, if you've been listening to Teach Better Talk for a while or connected with us on other mediums, my students work within themed internships that are all sponsored by local businesses. I won't get too much into this, but I use the Teach Further model, which allows my students to essentially take on a real job, and then they explore the math that we're learning in math class in that job. So one of the first jobs they take on, it's actually about the second job they take on in my classroom, is we are traveling around the world as travel agents. And we not only travel as travel agents to a number of different beautiful places, but they are exploring their own cultures and sharing with the students in their classroom about the cultures of those areas. And then as we visit those areas, they're using numbers to explain population, elevation. We climb up mountains and we go deep sea diving. And it's a great way to not only explore integers, rational numbers, but it allows students who identify with being Indian or Hispanic or, everywhere around the world, it seems like we always have somebody sharing their culture, their background, their celebrations. And it's a really fun way to get to know my students really early on in the school year. It's so hard the first few weeks. I mean, you're learning their names, but we really do need to do better at truly getting to know our students. And that's where this kind of movement of building relationships with our students has really come to fruition over the past few years. But I love getting to know, the holidays they celebrate and how they greet one another and, what they do at home outside of school that relates to their background. I think it's really powerful. So anytime you can embed those purposeful learning opportunities into the content purposeful learning opportunities, I think can be really beneficial for any classroom.
Yeah, and I love that you do that with your students, because now they're sharing with each other and they're learning about each other and they're learning the diversity that's within their peers in their classroom there. Sheldon actually touches on on a story that he shares about a time that he realized that just because he looked like someone else didn't mean that they shared the same culture. And so I think that's a really cool thing. You can see some diversity, but there's so much that you also cannot see, and that and diving into those backgrounds and truly understand the different backgrounds and the different cultures that we all come from it's just such an important thing and a cool thing. I love that you do that in your classroom. So I super excited that Sheldon went there and we were able to share that here, and hopefully if anyone's listening, they can kind of take up your travel guide unit, which is super cool. So this episode we already touched on. We've already said it like 6 times. It's just a phenomenal episode. So much value and something that's very, very important. But Sheldon Eakins joined us, and he is the director of the Leading Equity Center and host of the Leading Equity podcast. He's also a special ed teacher, a little over 11 years in education. He's been a teacher, principal, and then now the director of special education. He's in a very unique situation where he teaches, and some really cool culture that he talks about and shares with us there. I love how in depth he gets in the stories he shares with us. But super fun episode, so much value. I learned so much. It was like I almost, at one point I almost couldn't speak. I didn't have like the words to go to the next question because I was just still absorbing everything that he was saying. So I'm super excited for everyone to hear this. Ray, anything that you want them to specifically listen for or that really stood out?
Can I be a little lame, Jeff, and say that you should not only take in everything from this episode, but you absolutely should go subscribe to Sheldon's podcast and leave a rating and review, because that is how, when you leave a rating and review for a podcast, that's how other listeners find the podcast. So you're actually like allowing the host to kind of share their message. So I really would love for all of you to go do that, either before you listen to the episode, but then come back and listen to the whole thing, or you can wait till after.
Yeah, and in that podcast, you're talking 100 plus episodes. So that's 100 plus conversation that Sheldon has been having with other educators and other folks around equity. So much to learn there, so much value there. So super, super excited to get into episode 103 with Sheldon Eakins. What's up, podcast? It's Jeff. Hey, we're going to get right back in the episode, but I wanted to jump in and make sure you are aware of the Teach Better Conference coming November 8th and 9th here in Northeast Ohio. You can get all the information over at teachbetterconference.com. Make sure you use the code PODCASTTALK to save $50 on either one of those 2-day registrations. I look forward to seeing you in November at Teach Better Conference. Let's get back to the episode. All right, we are here and we are talking with Sheldon Eakins. And Sheldon, super excited to have you on. And I've got to go right at it, right to start with how awesome you are, because you're in your car, you had a delayed flight, you're on your way back from a conference, and you had a whole bunch of reasons you could have told us we needed to reschedule, and you didn't. You're here. You're rocking it out. So we not only are excited to have you on, but we really appreciate that. That just says a lot about you, I think, and that makes me super excited for this episode. So really appreciate that, and appreciate you taking some time out and hanging out with us. Before we get going any further, man, I just want to see how you feeling right now.
I'm feeling good. Yeah, I'm having a good day so far. It was a long day because of all the travel, and I still have a little bit further to go before I'm actually in the house, but I'm feeling good.
Yeah, Sheldon, you sound like you've had a really long day, but we'll try and take it easy on you on this podcast, I promise.
Okay.
Well, it's easy to start with the first question because we really just want our listeners to get to know you. I was so thankful to be connected with you for the past few months. I loved being a part of your podcast, which I really hope we talk all about during this episode. But would you mind for our listeners just sharing kind of all that you do?
Yes, all that I do. How much time? I'll tell you this. First of all, I'm a family man. I have two kids and a wife, and I live here in Pocatello, Idaho. A
Ooh.
wonderful place, very rural place. So my daytime job is a special education director. I have the fortunate opportunity to work on a Native American reservation, and so as a special education director, we work with, there's a total of about 110 students at the school, and that's grades 6 through 12. So it's a smaller school, and that's what I do in a day. And then I also, like you mentioned, I have a podcast called the Leading Equity Podcast, which is a podcast that focuses on providing educators with the tools and resources necessary to ensure equity at their school. And then recently, I started the Leading Equity Center. So that's what I do in a nutshell.
Well,
Wonderful.
it's a big nutshell. It's a lot going on. So the school that you're at is a unique situation. I think the first we've had anyone who's in that situation. Can you tell us, maybe share some of the differences that you might be experiencing on a daily basis being there versus your quote unquote typical public education?
That's a good question. And there's so much culture on a reservation.
Mm-hmm.
So there's actually two tribes that are represented on this reservation, and so the school is situated in a really nice location there. Like I said, it's about 110 students, and I mean, on any given day, I could easily walk down the hall. I could smell cedar burning, where they're doing various rituals. For there's things called the smudge, and basically, you're just trying to, if you think about it from a just like that, or like, I have a bad vibe, and so I'll burn some cedar to kind of clear the air, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
On a typical day, I'll see students come in with a buffalo that they just hunted and killed, and now they're going through the process of cleaning the buffalo hide and doing those kind of things, or building a drum from buckskin, or they're maybe making a flute. I mean, it's just so much culture, and it's just part of my day. Especially, I've been out there for about 4 years, and part of my day is just learning as much as I can about the culture. And then, in addition to that, I mean, I share about my culture, and
Mm-hmm.
students ask me questions, teachers ask me questions. So it's very different than a typical public school setting, because of the sovereignty. So religion is fine. Every at the beginning of each week, we have what we call opening ceremonies, and that's usually about a 10-minute time where there's prayer. There's the principal will make announcements, and then at the end of the week, we do closing ceremonies. And again, that's a closing prayer, for the weekend. Everyone be safe, kind of thing. Any other announcements, and there's rituals and ceremonies that happen, assemblies that happen. Again, you won't get those type of things at a traditional public school.
Now, are you teaching to the same state standards, or are there special regulations, different regulations on a reservation, or are they state standards?
Yeah, so good question. Okay, how do I break this down? Because we're sovereign. We're part of a sovereign nation,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I don't report to the state. However, I do get the state standards, but everything is run through the Bureau of Indian Education, which is underneath the U.S. Department of Education. So all my reporting, like state testing, we do the state testing, but it doesn't count, if that makes sense. Like, it doesn't count towards what we're doing, because we report to the BIE. So even though we do the state testing, even though I do, make sure that my paperwork as far as a special education director is in line, a lot of it is the same, but some of it will be a little bit more, some of it might be a little less according to what the state standards say.
And so if the state standard, if the state testing doesn't count, is the purpose for doing that? Just for so the state also has that data, or
Yeah.
okay,
So so that the state has the data, so we can compare what we're doing in comparison to the other schools in the state. Again, just as far as what we're required to do, as far as what the BIE wants us to do, is something that we add on. Just again to kind of measure where we're at
sure.
and see where things are.
Great. Well, I appreciate you kind of giving us a little insight, and that's a very interesting scenario, and so appreciate that a whole lot. I want to talk more about your podcast, if you don't mind.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, so maybe about the podcast and then the Leading Equity Center as well. Can you kind of tell us sort of, I assume that they're connected in a way, and did they come about at the same time, one before the other? What's the mission, and what are you trying to accomplish with those?
Yeah, so about a year ago, this time last year, I was just coming back from Chicago from the National Principals Conference, and I went to a session with Jethro Jones and Danny Sunshine Bauer and William Parker, and it was Podcasting 101. And at the time, I was kind of considering, okay, I want to either blog or I want a podcast. And I realized, you know what, I don't really like to do the writing thing. And so I just wanted some more information about podcasting. And they kind of broke it down as far as what podcasting looks like. And they even did a live recording of an interview. And I was like, you know what, this is really not as hard as I thought it is. And that kind of sparked my interest. And one of the things, and I've been listening to podcasts for a while, but one of the things that I used to notice was, there's things that I deal with, or there's topics that I'm really interested in that are centered around equity. And although I love to learn how to be, better leader or maybe a better teacher, but how do I address issues of equity? And I didn't see that information on a consistent basis. And so I'm like, I can't be the only person that feels this way. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to create a podcast that is dedicated to nothing but topics centered around equity. And equity is such a broad umbrella. I mean, so that includes special education, social emotional learning, behavior management. I mean, there's so much packed into it. And so that's basically how things started a year ago. And then I would say maybe about 4 months ago, I was like, I kept getting all the same questions, how can I be more culturally responsive, or how can I be a better advocate at my school when it comes to issues of equity? What can I do? And so I created a course called Teaching Through a Culturally Diverse Lens. And so that's kind of the birth of the Leading Equity Center. So yeah, they are tied together, but the podcast came first. And then as I started getting a lot of the same questions coming up about, okay, how can I be better with equity? I know this is an issue at my school. There's things that are happening, but I don't really know what to do. I don't really know what to say. I don't know what some of these terminology, like some of the terms are that I hear a lot, and I don't know what to do. So I'm actually it's a 6-week program, and we're currently, at the time of this recording, I think this is week 4. And I have several students, and I have such a diverse range of students that are in it. I have superintendents, I have teachers, I have counselors, district level and in a school level, people that are aspiring to be teachers that are in this program. And so we have 5, kind of like a classroom session where we meet on Zoom, and we talk about various issues, and I facilitate discussion in addition to the actual course content, where the students can like watch videos, lessons that I have created to kind of learn more about how they can address issues of equity. So I think it's a really cool course. This is, like I said, it's kind of new, and I'll be rolling it out again in October, but this is, it's learning experience for me because, just talking to other people that are in either similar situations where, maybe they live in a state or an area or to work in a school where they feel like they're the only ones that are advocating for their students. And they just kind of want some more guidance on how to be a better advocate for their students.
Oh man, that's important work that you're doing. That's really awesome, and I love that you have that going on. Where can we go? Where's the best place to go to find more information on all of that?
So www.leadingequitycenter.com. That is the website. That is where that information is. Of course, if you have iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, those kind of things, you can go to, find Leading Equity Podcast. And I post all my episodes on my other website, which is sheldoneakins.com.
And I'm going to make sure that we'll have all of that over in the show notes for everyone to easily find and click through to that. So that's awesome. I really appreciate you sharing all that with us, Sheldon. Now, I'm super excited about asking you this. So this is one of my favorite questions to ask. We talk a lot about on the podcast. We always talk about failure. I talk a lot about being fortunate enough to have failed a lot because every failure that I've had, regardless of how much I didn't enjoy them when they happen, as I look back, I see how they've molded me. So I'm excited for you to share a story with us about a time that you've had a failure. Can you share us, kind of take us there with you? Tell us what happened. How did you overcome it? And then what did you take away from that?
Good question. So first teaching job ever, fresh out of college, I get a phone call, just randomly playing. I think I was playing video games with my brother on the couch. And they're like, yeah, I'm the superintendent from the Virgin Islands. Do you want to come out and teach? We need a history teacher. I'm like, Virgin Islands? Shoot, you had me at hello. And I'm like, of course. So, I get recruited to go to the Virgin Islands to teach history. And, I'm on the first plane basically out. And, such an amazing experience. But Jeff and Ray, one of the things about being a Black person on an island, I blend in. And it's not until I start speaking that they realize, wait a second, you're not from here. You're a Yankee. You're from the mainland. And you're like, what's going on? And I'm like, oh man, they found me. Like, they found out I'm not local. But I would say one of the biggest failures that I had was when I first got there, because I came straight from the States. I came from this mindset of, all cultures are the same. All Black people have a lot of similar characteristics. And I thought, I could just kind of navigate the way I would navigate in the States. And so, like, I would have students come up to me, hey, good morning, Mr. Eakins, or good afternoon, Mr. Eakins. And I'd be like, hey, what's up, yo? Hey, how y'all doing? Yo, what's up? What's up? And like my roommate at the time, he was also a teacher at the school. He was like, hey, Sheldon, like all the kids are saying that you're being rude to them. I'm like, what are you talking about? What, being rude? I'm like, they say hello, good morning and stuff. And I say, hey, what's up, man? How y'all doing, man? Good to see you. Like, yeah, but in our culture, when someone says good morning to you, you say good morning back. Like, you don't say what's up. You don't say, like, you answer them the same way that they answered you. And I'm like, oh my goodness. Like, cause I had no clue. I was just thinking I was just, this is what we do in the States. Cause where I come from in the States, we don't necessarily just say good morning to each other. That's not necessarily a thing. And, we say, what's up? Or, hey, what's happening? What you up to? Those kind of things. That's how we greet each other. The head nod. Those are the things that we do. And over there, it was a lot different. And so I had to quickly learn that I was being perceived as rude, even though I thought, intentionally, I thought I was actually being nice, and I was actually thought I was being outgoing and, just being that cool new teacher. But instead, I was being the cool, rude teacher. And so once I learned about that culture piece, I was like, okay, what other things culturally am I missing out on? What other things do I not know about that I need to learn about quickly? Because I don't want to, okay, so I addressed the greetings part, but there's other things within their culture that I'm not addressing. And I don't want to miss those as well. So I just engulfed myself with their culture. I mean, I did everything that I could, any kind of activities, festivals, any kind of event, I was there. And I had never kayaked before, but there's so many beaches out there, and they had a kayak team. I joined the kayak team. I started to be a coach. I had never picked up a paddle in my life. Yet I'm going to learn. I'm going to learn how to be a kayaker, and I just everything that I could learn, I just embraced that culture, and that was a very, very valuable lesson to me, because sometimes we, especially if we don't identify with the same background. I'm just thinking, I'm Black, so there's a lot of things that are similar, but even within Blackness, there's so many different community things that when you're in those settings, you have to learn. And I didn't do that at first. And that was like, once I learned, okay, just saying good morning, good afternoon, good night, those kind of things is one piece. That was kind of like that door that opened up for me to say, okay, what else do you need to learn? What else do you not know about this culture that you're serving?
Sheldon, I think that was my favorite failure story I have
Mm-hmm.
ever heard on this podcast. Like, I love this idea, this focus of needing to really get to know the cultural background of your students to ensure that you are reaching them as deeply as possible. I mean, whether you're on a beautiful island or in the Midwest, middle of nowhere small town, this is relevant in every single school.
Yeah, yeah. Like I said, it was a lesson that I learned within the first few weeks. Uh, I was just so mesmerized with all the beauty that was on the island, and yet I didn't take the time to really learn about it. It's like I saw it, it was there, but it was just, oh, that's nice. That's a nice, beautiful tree. Oh, this island, this beach is so nice. Look at this sand. This is awesome. But I didn't go any further than that, and that was a valuable lesson for me.
All right, if you are listening right now to Teach Better Talk, I want to challenge you to consider what cultural backgrounds you have not explored that exist in your classroom right now. Because I can tell you in my classroom, there's such diversity. There are so many things I still have to learn. And this is a perfect example, call to action. You have to go and explore more because that's how we're connecting with our students. Your example was perfect. I love that, Sheldon. With everything that you have done, which your background is so neat. I'm like soaking all this in and everything you're continuing to do and the dreams you have for the future. I mean, what's fueling your fire? What's keeping you excited about education and everything that you're doing?
What's the most exciting for me right now is and it could be just the circles that I'm in and just kind of like maybe my own biases when it comes to equity, but I'm hearing a lot more conversations centered around equity, how
Yeah.
we can better serve our students, how we can uh, make sure that our students of color are being treated fairly and getting what they need, and not just about equality, but we're actually looking at each individual student and seeing
Yeah.
what their needs are. That's what's so exciting for me. But I put a caveat out there, Ray, because sometimes I've seen these conversations happen as either one and done's. So, I'll go to this professional development and, 2 hour session, half a day session, rah, rah, rah. I'm excited. I'm pumped. But how much is that being applied? Like how quickly our teachers are applying this information? Or the other thing that I'm seeing is, okay, these things are now becoming buzzwords. Oh, you know what? I'm very culturally responsive, or I'm very diverse, or I'm all about inclusion, or I'm all about social emotional learning. Like those words are getting thrown out in conversations, but the action is not always there. And so while I'm excited that these conversations are happening more and more, I like to make sure that the action is happening behind it. So, how you read a book, I don't know, self help book, how to, I don't know, how to clean your room in 2 minutes, whatever it is. Are we able to apply that information after we've actually read through that book? Are we practicing these things and not just one activity, one project, but we're continually sustaining a culturally responsive classroom?
Oh my God, Jeff, are you like having a heart attack on the other end of the microphone over there? He literally just repeated the teach better mindset of
Yeah.
like needing to put all of this stuff into action and
Mm.
fluffing enough.
Yeah, you guys are with me. I mean, it's one thing to teach better, right? But we have to apply these things. We can't just read book after book after book, or watch YouTube after YouTube, or podcast after podcast. We have to actually be applying these things.
Mm-hmm.
That's how we help our students that's how we get them to where they need to be.
Absolutely. My God. So with Sheldon, obviously, I mean, you are speaking my language. I think we could talk on this for hours. I want to know for we have a ton of listeners right now hearing your message. They're feeling inspired about wanting to ensure that what they're seeing is actually being put in place. What advice do they need to be successful in doing that?
So here's the thing, and there's a lot of research that supports what I'm about to say. teacher preparation programs do not always prepare teachers on issues centered around equity. So even myself, and I went to a historically black college. And like I said earlier in our conversation, I went across the seas to an island thinking, oh, I'm prepared. I know everything I need to know how to be a good teacher. Yet there was issues or challenges that I had initially. So I think the teacher preparation programs, a lot of them are really good with foundational, theoretical practices. This is, the theory of learning, and this is this framework and that framework. But when it comes to being culturally responsive and looking at your demographics and saying, okay, this is a class that I have, these are the content or standards that I'm supposed to teach. How do I make sure that this is relevant, that the students can see themselves with what I'm going to teach? How do I make sure, if I'm so inundated with, okay, the tests, I got to prepare them for the tests, for the state exam, or for whatever, summative assessments or whatever it is that I have to do. So I'm just focused on making sure that they get that information, but I'm not actually looking at who my classroom makeup is, like who's in my class and what cultures they're bringing. What assets do they have? Are they bilingual? Are they multilingual? Like, what is there that I could use as an asset as opposed to looking at it as a deficit? And I see a lot of teacher prep programs may have one class built in to their, there may be 10 classes and one of them is a diverse class. And, they just pack everything in. So maybe they'll talk about race, maybe they'll talk about sexual identity, and maybe they'll talk about special education. It's all within that 16 weeks or 8-week class. And that's it. That's the only thing that's being talked about. And then they do their student teaching in certain areas where they're not actually going to end up getting a job. And so then they come out again, they graduate and they're still unprepared to deal with various cultures that are represented in our school. Our demographics are shifting. I believe it's like 51% of our student population is students of color. And if we're not thinking about how students of color make up the majority of a lot of these classrooms, and we're just thinking, okay, here's a new teaching practice that I've had and that I learned while I was in college, and we're not looking at it from an individual basis and looking at what students are actually bringing to the table, how engaged do we expect all of them to be? How well do we think that they're going to perform if they never see anybody that looks like them in their content? If you're teaching science and all of your scientists or all the theories and everything is built off of white folks, and they don't ever see any Latinx scientists or contributions from indigenous science or African American science, then what are they going to think? They're going to think, well, maybe my people haven't really contributed to this field. And that's a part that we have to do as educators, in making sure that that information is being shared as well.
Ray, I'm sitting over here and I know I'm supposed to ask the next question, but I'm like just trying to absorb all this. I can't even speak. Sheldon, this is seriously just an awesome episode. I'm super excited right now. I'm so glad that you pulled over into a Taco Bell parking lot and then had to move. And now you're where, like outside of a hotel or something? This is awesome. So let's we've just, it's just been an outpouring of so much value here and some things that I hope is getting everyone listening really thinking about what they are or are not doing and putting into practice right now. And I hope they're thinking of all the ways that they can take steps to further these thoughts and to further the way they're looking at equity and the diversity in their classrooms and in their schools and learning the cultures and stuff. I know it's going through my head right now. So really, really awesome. Loving it. We're going to have a little bit of fun right now. Not that we haven't had fun the whole time, but you know what I mean. We're going to have a little more fun here. So we're going to do the next 6 questions, and your goal is to answer each one in 15 seconds or less. You ready to go?
Let's do it.
All right. What is one ed tech tool you cannot live without?
Audacity.
Give us a book that you're reading right now.
The book I'm reading right now is called Expert Secrets by Richard Brunson.
Who do we need to follow on Twitter or Instagram today?
So one of my good friends is Erica B. Rivera. She is awesome. Again, if you're interested in learning about equity stuff, she is a go-to person that I look at as well. She and I communicate all the time.
Give us a good YouTube channel, website, podcast, or some sort of resource for educators.
So I have there's a 3 that I go to is Black History Buff, there's Class Dismissed, and Integrated Schools are some of my favorites that I listen to. Podcasts that I
Those
listen
are all 3 podcasts?
Yeah.
Awesome. Give us a daily, weekly, or monthly routine every teacher should get into.
15 seconds. Okay. Checking your implicit bias, just self-reflection, and seeing, okay, the different types of things that you're doing in a classroom, your decisions that you're making, just a lot of self-reflection is important.
And what's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
My dad once told me that you'll never be caught up. There's always going to be work to do.
Isn't that the truth?
Yeah.
Right?
We say as we're recording this at 9:00 at night on a Monday. I mean, it's the truth. You'll never be caught up, but that's okay. You just gotta hustle.
Yeah. I was at a really low point at that time where I felt overwhelmed with all. I was a principal at the time, and I had so much to do. And he just told me, Sheldon, you'll never be caught up. Just take one thing at a time.
It's great advice. Nailed it, Ray. Nailed it. From the parking lot, he nailed it.
But you're getting the trophy.
We're going to ship it to the parking lot, so don't leave.
Okay,
yeah.
I'll be here.
Well, I want to make sure all listeners can connect with you, Sheldon. I was a fan before, but I'm even more so one now. I've loved getting to hear more of your background, your story, your call to actions. This will be an episode. I know it sounds silly, but we record these and then they release weeks and weeks later. I will be listening back to this episode. There's so much value. Would you mind sharing with our listeners how they can get connected with you, stay connected with you, and hopefully subscribe and rate and review your podcast?
Sure. So my podcast is Leading Equity, and it's available on Google, Stitcher, what else? Google, Stitcher, Spotify, and then Libsyn. If you're listening to it on Libsyn, my Twitter handle is Sheldon Eakins, at Sheldon Eakins, and that's Eakins is spelled EAKINS. My Instagram is the same, Sheldon Eakins. My website is sheldoneakins.com. And if you want more information on how to be better with teaching through a culturally diverse lens, that's at www.leadingequitycenter.com. I don't have any YouTube channels right now, and I do have a Facebook page, so you can find me at Leading Equity on Facebook as well.
Awesome. And you can find all the links and all the resources we've mentioned in this episode over at teachbetter.com, as well as those really important links for connecting with Sheldon, checking out the Leading Equity Center, listen to the podcast, all of that. So make sure you head over to the show notes at teachbetter.com for everything there. Be sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming episodes. And if you could give us a rating and review, we'd really appreciate that as well. And let's take it one step further. Think of just 3 of your colleagues who need to hear these amazing stories and share this podcast with them. Sheldon, this was a phenomenal episode. There's so much value in there, so much importance in what you shared with us today. Truly, truly appreciate you taking the time and sharing your story with us, sharing your knowledge with us, and having a little bit of fun with us. We just really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, well, it was my pleasure. Thanks for having me on the show.
And until next time, let's get out there and let's teach better.